welcome to another episode of Sessions on That Note, and I'm here with the multi-talented Darin Murphy. Thanks for coming over today, Darin.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And I know that you are one of the hardest working musicians in a city that is known for hardworking musicians. You have a lot of different things going on. Well, it's known for hardworking musicians and slackers. I think there's that sort of contrast.
And I'm known for both. I'm known in the community as a hardworking musician, and by my wife as a slacker.
Well, that's good. You've got the sort of two sides to your personality that probably balances things out a bit, because you can work too hard, I think.
Yes, it is possible.
So I've been seeing you play in a lot of different aspects for many, many years. You play in the very popular cover band Skyrocket with some of the most talented musicians in Austin. You play with one of my favorite musicians, Robert Harrison, in Future Clouds and Radar.
Now there is a hardworking musician.
Yes, he is.
Robert's the hardest working man I've
Yes, I really love Robert, and I've loved him in every incarnation that he's done over the years. And so even though I've seen you play for a long time, I don't know that much about your background. I know you've been playing music forever, and so maybe we can kind of start with how you got started in music, where that happened, and some of the things that inspired you back then.
Sure. Well, it started with my dad, our dad. He was a guitar player and a songwriter in the late 60s, and he had a band that was making music sort of along the lines of Simon and Garfunkel and Love and Spoonful. Very everyone back then was influenced by the Beatles and Dylan, so that was all part of the jukebox we had going in the house. My dad loved Dylan and the Stones and old guys like Jimmy Reed. My mother loved Otis Redding and Aretha. So we were all raised on pop music, and we sang together. My father taught us all at a very early age how to harmonize. And we sort of picked it up as an instinctive level, because at the time that we were growing up, harmony was king. There were really good solo singers, but anyone that was making the radio was singing really good harmonies, whether they were the Beatles or the Beach Boys or Simon and Garfunkel or the Four Freshmen that kind of influenced all of those guys. So we all learned to do that, but none of us started pursuing it as a career until several years after high school. And my sister and I started as an acoustic duo about 20 years ago, just playing around Houston, and developed a really large following in a very short time. It was just a kind of an onstage chemistry that we had together. And then we put out a couple of CDs and got ourselves a little backup band. And right around a couple of years later, 94 was when I moved to Austin. And then within 2 years, Trish was there as well, here as well. So our musical paths have sort of woven in and out over the past 20 years.
So basically, when you moved to Austin, kind of what were your goals for your musical career here? What were you kind of thinking would happen when you moved here?
Well, I moved here primarily to work on my vibe.
Okay, good place for a vibe.
Yeah, definitely, because there was just a couple of times that I've been here, I noticed that it was a different kind of ball game, that there was a chemistry that everybody worked to contribute to. It was a lot different from what I'd seen in Houston, where the things were just sort of scattered, and there's not a whole lot that got done there on a very productive or supportive level. And so I wanted to challenge myself as a musician and as a songwriter and also as a spirit. So this was just the place to do that.
Yeah, and I'm not even a musician, but I kind of feel that sense of community here, and Austin is a really special place for a lot of reasons. And I love the way the musicians support each other. You go to shows and the crowd is other musicians a lot of the time.
Yeah, musicians love music. They like to get out. A lot of it is a necessity. And I've read about this from other musicians, and they're in any scene. Andy Summers from The Police talked about being a part of the London scene. He just went out there to the clubs whether he wanted to or not. It was his job to go out there and stay connected, and be dirt poor and nursing that one drink all night long, just so you can stay there and get to know people. So that was what I did. I sat at home and I'm with my little 4-track machine and I wrote songs, and I also covered songs. I learned little production techniques on this one machine, and then I'd go around hawking my cassette tapes to people that I saw, that whose music I liked, or that whose personalities I liked, just to get feedback, really. And then one of the first guys that called me was Robert Harrison.
One of the first people.
Right.
Wow.
This was when Cotton Mather was together.
Yeah, and that's how I first know of Robert, was from Cotton Mather. Even before I moved to Austin, I was a fan of Cotton Mather's.
Yeah. So, and my sister and I had kind of split off. The band had split by this time, and I was working a day job and just sort of reinventing myself as an artist at that point. So I was brought in to play drums on that Kon-Tiki album, and we
right over there.
great record. So after that, I started getting more and more encouragement to actually make a complete record by myself, because I'd made all these demos. I had enough for an album, so at that point I decided, all right, well, I don't really have a band. There are a few people that I like to play with, but what I really need to do is just go in and make this record and play everything myself, just so I could say I did it. And so that was how Solitarian came about.
Okay.
It was my first solo album.
What year was that?
That was it was 99 when that record came out. So it was released here, and then eventually it was released over in the UK a year later.
Okay, so you made your first solo album, but I know you, like a lot of musicians in this town, you played with a lot of different people on a lot of projects. I always know at the end of South by Southwest, people end up at the hole in the wall and they're comparing, I played 12 gigs, I played 16.
So, yeah, I did a few of those.
So what are some of the bands that you played with over the years?
Well, naturally, I played drums for Trish for a long time. And I actually toured Europe with her under several hats. I was her house sound guy once, I was her guitar player once, and I was her drummer once. But I've also played with Patricia Vaughan, played with Kevin McKinney as a solo artist, and also with Soul Hat, a wonderful songwriter named Shane Bartell.
He's great.
Yeah. A band called The Love Supreme that moved to LA and became Oliver Future.
Oh yeah, I've seen
them. They're still together. And of course, I've played on several recordings with Robert Harrison, and with Cotton Mather and Future Clouds and Radar. And then I think everything else was just sort of one-offs. I did a few drumming gigs with Johnny Gowdy. One with
another person I love. I think he's great.
One with
he's also in Skyrocket.
Oh, love Johnny. Gotta love Johnny. Did people like Renee Woodward.
And so obviously musicians can support themselves by playing in different situations. You're obviously very versatile because you can play all sorts of instruments and have lots of experience. But I know you've done some other things with your musical skills that might help other musicians understand how to kind of balance out their career.
Well, for me, the key was just leaving myself open to possibilities.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea for everyone.
I worked the solo thing for a long time, and I dealt with everything, with every technical obstacle, every emotional obstacle that every artist goes through. And after a while, you reach a point where you have to make serious decisions about what you're going to do. And there was a point where I said, like, if I was going to be really successful as a solo artist, it would have already happened. And
at what point was that?
I think that was probably between albums.
Okay. I think I know a lot of musicians that are in that same situation. I mean, they love music and it's their lives, but they know that it's not going to be maybe what they had envisioned when they were in their 20s. Right.
And so by the time that I was making my second album, I was thinking, well, I'm respected as a songwriter and as a performer, but this is not the only thing that I can do. It's not really the only thing I should do. I don't have to. There's no reason for me to bet my entire life on this one aspect of what I'm good at. So I started to diversify at that point. And it wasn't that I went out and pursued one avenue or another. I had just put enough of a reputation out there that people started looking for me.